Hi, welcome back. As you've probably realised, I don't do that many knife reviews anymore. Do a few flashlights and EDC gear and stuff, but knife reviews have kind of gone off the boil a little bit. There are two companies that I still like to review because they're UK based and they produce products that are really relevant for the UK users, which I like to support. One of those is Who Knives, and they've got a new release out now, so I thought I would show you the new release, which is the Phoenix. Comes as usual in this rather nice little plastic box. Just pop that open. You can actually request your own number. I requested number 75, my year of birth, but you can request from them. They'll show you which numbers they've got available from the run, and you can request whichever you like. And then we have the knife in this neat little and a microfiber cloth bag with the Who Knives logo on. They also send you a card with some tech specs on, a couple of contact cards and thank you cards. We've got a guarantee there as well. There's a lifetime guarantee, and we also have a couple of rather nice stickers. Boxes lined with foam. I've seen those before. I've reviewed the V3, a couple of versions of that on here before, and you guys probably know I absolutely love that knife. I carry it a lot. It's UK EDC, so you know it doesn't lock out, and it also has the facility to make sure it doesn't close up on your finger, which we'll see here as well. So if we pull that out, it's definitely a different form factor than the V3 and the V2 and V1 in fact that we've been used to. I'll show you that one of the V3s there. You can see it's quite a kind of oblong design. It doesn't really have that many curves to it, lots of straight lines in there. And then we can see this one is a little bit more elegant. It's got a kind of curve on the back end, more of a natural shape to it. We have that lanyard hole there, titanium frame, and then we have a Bowler M390 blade which pops out like so. So you do have that flipper tab on there, and you have your thumb studs on there. As you can see, they're actually removable. The easiest way to close these I found, or the safest way I found to close them, is to actually keep them locked in there and then just pop the detent and you can close them back down. Just show you it opening with the thumb studs like so. So you can see really nice action. It's got a stone washed finish to the handle, and then a mirror polish on the Bowler M390 blade. Now the blade length, if we're talking about cutting edge, it's just below 2.5 inches. It's 2.49 inches, and that keeps it well below the 3-inch regulation in the UK. I know there's a few other European countries that have these sort of regulations as well, so it may fit with yours. And as I say, it's not locking. You know, that's a double detent mechanism, so the detent keeps the blade nicely in place. It's not going to fall out and come undone in your pocket. And then obviously you can just flip it out like so, and that then locks into your hand very comfortably. And as you can see, the flipper tab is sitting just in front of my forefinger there. So now, you know, you can break the detent, but you couldn't actually close that on your finger, whatever you were doing. If you were doing some sort of motion where you were trying to dig something out, it might break the detent, but it's not actually going to shut on your finger. So a very safe double detent knife. You know, we do have this regulation in the UK where we cannot carry locking blades without a very specific reason. If you need to carry a locking blade and you're working, or you're going like camping or something like that, there's, you know, lots of good excuses as to why you might need to carry one, and that would be fine. But just be aware, if you're walking around at random, then you can't be carrying a locking bladed knife, and you can't be carrying a fixed bladed knife. I've heard some people in the comments saying, you know, well, my good reason is that sometimes I might need one, and that would not be a good enough reason in UK law. You can't just say, oh, I keep it in the car because, you know, I might need it sometimes to do some sort of work. You have to be specifically using it at that time or at that day, or transporting it to or from work or to or from your specific activity. And we can all use our brains and understand what would be reasonable in that context. You know, if you're going fishing, camping, bushcrafting, something along those lines, and you can kind of demonstrate that that is what you're doing. If you're walking around, you know, in a housing estate and you say, oh, I might go camping later, that's not going to be a viable excuse. If you were going camping, you would have all your camping gear with you, and you probably wouldn't be walking around a housing estate. So you get what I'm saying. You know, these are quite specific regulations. I've heard from a lot of people that carry like a multi-tool in their vehicle, and they've said, yeah, but you know, it's a tool, I'm just going to use it, whatever. If it has a locking blade in it, you could end up in hot water. So please be aware. So carry something along these lines that does not lock, still gives you all the function you need to. There's always people in the comments that say it flips out, you know, that's illegal. These guys have been selling these knives in the UK now for many years, and there's several other manufacturers of these type of knives that don't lock out, that you can be flipped out if you so wish, and none of them have ever had any legal issues. As far as I'm aware, none of their customers have had any legal issues. You know, I've asked who about this, they haven't heard anything from the police about this, no one's got a problem with it. The law in this area is kind of a grey area. You know, that there is some changes that they made to the assisted opening knife section of the Dangerous Weapons Act. That was brought about basically to eradicate what were flick knives, I guess the terminology would describe them, but they were spring-based knives, and we had these assisted openers where if you just helped it out a couple of millimeters, then, you know, it would spring out itself and it would be automatic. These are not automatic, and that for me is the pertinent word in that section of law, that automatic would be without any human interaction whatsoever. So if you've helped it out manually and then it automatically does the rest of the job for you, that could be seen as an issue. However, this particular knife, there's nothing automatic about it at all. It's completely manual. I have to manually do all the work. You know, if I don't manually do all the work, it doesn't open. As you can see, it's just half open there, so I have to actually manually give it enough energy. And with any knife, you know, if you loosened up the blade a little bit on pretty much any slip joint and then gave it enough energy and flicked it out really hard, it would open. And that's manual opening still. It's the use of a human being exerting energy onto it to actually get the blade open. If you loosened it so much that you just held it upside down and then it kind of opened and somehow stayed open, there could be some argument that that was a gravity knife. Obviously that's not going to happen here. This is not by any means a gravity knife. As it uses the titanium, obviously it's nice and light. It comes in at about 91.7 grams, so it's not going to weigh you down too much. I really like the pocket clips on these Who knives. They're ambidextrous, so you can, if you wish, undo that pocket clip and move it over to the other side, and they're nice and strong, but it's smooth on both sides, both on the inside of that pocket clip and on the scale itself, so you can take them in and out of a pocket. Even if you're wearing smart work clothes, you know, they're not going to start ripping up your pockets. On a lot of the knives, especially some with the micarta scales on them, they've got quite a rough section there, which is great for grip. But if you're someone who's EDCing a knife, you're probably not wearing, you know, skanky old forest trousers or whatever. You're probably EDCing them in pretty normal trousers. What tends to happen then is it just rips the pocket over time. I've actually gone through a couple of pairs of trousers like that, where it's eventually just ripped the fabric completely through. So I tend to prefer something a bit smooth. Now, I'm not using these things in like an environment where I'm having to grip it to death. You know, I'm not trying to sort of fight my way out of a survival situation or something. I'm just using them as a run-of-the-mill EDC knife, so I'm prepared to lose out on any sort of added grip there. And like I said, it really locks you in tight anyway, so it's certainly not going that way at all. And because of the handle shape, it's very ergonomic. It does feel very comfortable in the hand. You get some level of grip from that clip there that fits nicely in the finger gap, and the whole thing just feels really, really good. Nice blade shape. It's a classic blade design. It's pretty thick, so you know it's going to be up to doing some pretty tough manual work. As we know, Bowler M390 is a really, really high quality blade still. It's not going to require sharpening that often, but when you do sharpen it, you are going to have some pretty decent sharpening gear on hand. Bowler M390 is quite resilient, so if you're going to just try and sharpen it with some really cheap sharpening gear, it's probably going to take you forever. I would definitely either get someone who knows what they're doing and is professional and has decent gear to sharpen it for you, or invest in some decent gear yourself. Of course, everyone wants to know, do they come sharp out of the box? So we'll have a test. Yes, as you can see, really nice and sharp, no problem with that paper. Piece of card or cut their warranty down. Yeah, really, really good indeed. Plenty sharp enough for anything I would want to do with it. It has got a sharpening choil there, so as you do sharpen this blade over the years, obviously you start to lose width because you're taking material away from this section. The idea with that is so it doesn't look really odd and you don't get a sort of fat piece here and then it gets thinner as time goes on, so you've got plenty of like wear available on that. But also it just makes sure that you can actually get this edge onto your sharpener without scuffing up all the parts around this section of the knife, which happens if the blade comes right back to here. The temptation is, you know, to sharpen it right back to here, and then you end up scuffing all these pieces here as well. Some people on the older models of the Who knives had a bit of a moan about the thumb studs. You know, they'd said to me, oh, I can't get my fingers on the thumb studs, you know, they're too small or they're too hidden away in the handle. And as you can see, these protrude just enough to get your thumb onto them. I actually find them very comfortable. It's not my preferred method of opening any knife, to be honest, with thumb studs. I always prefer to use a tab, and we can see the tab poking out the back there. A lot easier to just put a finger on that. It's got a little bit of jimping on, just so you can get some leverage if it's wet or anything like that. And it flips straight out. We've also got a bit of jimping on the back side there. I really like the jimping on these because it's just doing what jimping should be, which is to provide a little bit of traction, a little bit of grip, so you can choke up on the knife and gain some control over it for some delicate work you're doing, if you're doing any work on sort of craft stuff or anything delicate at all. But it's not so aggressive that it's actually cutting into your fingers or clothing. Again, when you have this jimping, if you're pulling that in and out of your pocket, you know, the jimping's obviously on the outside of the knife, and that's something that can also rag your clothing as you're pulling this thing in and out. So you really don't want super aggressive jimping if you can help it. If we can compare, you can see the slight difference in blade shape. This one more of a kind of dagger shape, I suppose. It's got that kind of false edge on top. That's not sharp at all, but the more traditional blade shape at the bottom. And it looks, to be honest, a better blade shape for my liking for general use. It's a little thicker on the spine than the V3s, but overall across the blade, you know, we can see there's very little difference between them in terms of thickness. Guys, these aren't cheap, you know, I'll come out with that straight away. I always try and keep this honest. Good knives are never cheap. You know, you can buy a 30, 40 pound or dollar knife. It is what it is. That's going to be okay for some people. These are not in that category. These are a premium category. You're paying for the titanium, you're paying for the Bowler M390. None of those materials are cheap. You're paying for the company to be based in the UK, just like you might pay more for a company to be based in the US. That is entirely your own decision, and it's down to people's budgets and what they can afford and what they deem desirable or necessary. I prefer, you know, I really like collecting some knives, and I prefer to collect and to use knives of a higher quality, this would last me for the rest of my life. You know, that's the way I look at it. I'm not looking to buy something that lasts a couple of years and then I throw it away and replace it. I'm looking for something that would last me many, many years, possibly for the rest of my time on this planet, which I think this is so well built that it definitely could do that. So if you want one, I'll chuck a link up below. Let me know what you think, guys. Let me know if you've bought one of these and you're really happy with it. Maybe you've got the V3. If you have the V3 and you're thinking about jumping onto this model, then I definitely recommend you do if you've got the money spare. But if you're new to Who Knives and you're thinking about entering into buying one, this is the one I would recommend for sure. I just prefer the ergonomics of it overall, and I like the look of it as well. As I say, I'd love to hear your opinions. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care. I'll catch you all next time.